Do you dream of drawing buildings with effortless perspective where everything just looks right? Whatever's happening with the ground or the windows or the building, however we're viewing it, everything just looks right rather than not quite right or out and out alarming. Let me show you what I think are probably the 5 commonest perspective errors, and then you can use it to look back over some of your drawings that you feel aren't quite right and see if you can't identify particular issues that you could very usefully pay a bit more attention to when you draw. Or perhaps even have another look at perspective theory to understand more fully. Let's start. While I quickly draw something which will have all the perspective problems I want to highlight, notice that I'm not drawing a particularly realistic building, because to have something simpler will show the problems more clearly. So, for what it's worth, here it is with a lot of the problems I constantly see. This clearly looks not right, but in order to address these problems more easily, it's going to be helpful to take 2 minutes to remind ourselves of what we should be looking for, particularly if we're drawing from our imagination. So, what's wrong with this? The first issue is this fan shape that we need to see in these horizontal lines. Fan shape because they all go to one point. They all come from one point. And here and here we have parallel lines. This is probably the most common and most obvious perspective mistake we see. Foreshortening is the next problem here. We see here that this is actually the halfway point. So with equally spaced elements, half should be here and half should be here. And just as the widths of the windows, in this case, narrow, so do the widths between them. So in this top section here, this should be the halfway point. And instead, our halfway point is here. It's actually much closer to the actual halfway point if we just jump across. So that's the second problem. The foreshortening hasn't allowed the proper distribution of architectural elements on each side. The next common error here is that we can see how where elements align on a horizontal line, if we were looking straight at the wall, those elements, in this case the top and bottoms of the windows, they follow the same, they fit in with the same fan pattern. It's very common to see windows especially have a horizontal line that doesn't fit in with the fan pattern. It's just horizontal. We'll stay with windows for the fourth one, and the next one is that where windows are the same shape, then the proportion of the windows needs to stay the same. The height to width ratio, that needs to stay constant even when the window shrinks in width and in height. But what's happened here, we can see that a window that's looking closer to being square up here actually becomes more squarish, and then it actually starts to become wider. So in the end, the relative width becomes much more than the relative height, and we end up with a shape that changes from this into being more like this for what is the same shaped thing. The fifth common error here is again a fan shape issue, but instead of a parallel line being drawn, we have a line that's too steep. It's angled too much. It should be angled upwards more. And I find this is very common when we have a longish wall for the top line. It's almost as if errors in the fan shape are trying to be corrected all at once. And the final error here is to do with eye level. We talked about how all the vanishing points, all the points where the perspective angles meet, are on the one horizontal line. In fact, that horizontal line becomes one of the fan-shaped lines, although there may not actually be any horizontal line in our building at that point. If there were one here, it would be horizontal. And so we can see here it would be about here, it would go horizontally through. And what we want is that all of these meet up, or approximately meet up, at the same points on the same line. But here, that's not going to be the case at all. If we were to join up these lines as best we can, this is the eye level on this side if we use these two lines. Of course, this line isn't going to meet up with it anyway. And these two lines meet down here, so this is in effect the eye level of the lower section of this side, and there's this gap here. And of course, if we were to use this top edge, then eye level is even lower down again. But what we have is inconsistencies from one wall to the other. When we want our drawing to look right or to feel right, then at least approximately all these things need to line up. Now, I don't plot vanishing points and eye levels when I draw. When I look at my reference, I make sure I find where eye level will be. And I use that simply to eyeball from the reference and approximate in my drawing a consistency as to where all these lines will line up for each wall and then between the two walls. By being very aware of the way windows in particular operate and the way foreshortening affects elements on the wall, I can confidently and accurately fit the architectural detail in whichever way the wall goes and at whichever angle. The steeper the wall moves away from us, then the further away it becomes more quickly, and the more extreme the foreshortening is. The narrower things become more quickly. If the wall doesn't slope away at the same angle, if it's a little more towards us, then we're going to be seeing things a bit more front on, and therefore the foreshortening will happen to a lesser degree than a wall that slopes away at a more extreme angle. When we understand all these principles, it's much easier to see them in our reference easily and then incorporate that in our observation and the very first marks we make on the paper. G'day, I'm Stephen Travers. Please hit that like button if you've become aware that 1, 2 or 3 or more of these are issues in your drawings. So why not grab a couple of your past drawings now and just see whether you have the fan shape everywhere it should be, or whether some of your lines are parallel or some of them, the lines don't angle in the right pattern for the rest of the lines. Check your foreshortening to see if the proportions of windows stay the same as they should, or if they morph from rectangles going one way to going the other way. Whether the tops and bottoms of windows align according to the fan shapes or not, and so forth. The sooner we start to practice getting it right, the sooner we'll start to do it without thinking. I find it very hard to draw these bad example perspective drawings because without thinking, I draw the lines at the right angles. But it wasn't always that way for me, and it won't always be that way for you. But in the end, whatever you draw, however you draw it, whatever you hope to draw, make sure you have fun. I'll see you next time. Bye.